Well, over in our Washington studio, RT's Dina Gusowski has Robert Norris, Senior Research Associate at Natural Resources Defense Council. Over to you, Dina.
Hi there. Well, you know, this issue was really a source of tension between the United States and Russia, so perhaps this opens more doors for cooperation. But, you know, experts thought that Barack Obama would make this kind of decision earlier on in his presidency. He just made the announcement today. So what does this mean in terms of U.S. policy moving forward? Well, joining me, Robert Norris from the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you so much for being here. So first of all, what is your take on this big announcement by Robert Gates and Barack Obama?
Well, I think it's a very positive development on many grounds in terms of the relationship we have with Russia and trying to improve that situation. I think it's also has to do with the timing of it is very crucial here because there is a session next week at the United Nations. President Medvedev is coming. The session has to do with nuclear disarmament. President Obama is the chairman of it. And so it's, I think, a gesture towards the Russians for cooperation and improved relations on an issue that bothered them for years and years.
Right, because when George W. Bush first made this decision, many experts were questioning the motives behind it, saying, is this all political? Was it even necessary? What do you think? Did this really counter any kind of threat, or could it have? And was there even a threat to begin with?
Right. Well, I think it was needlessly provocative against the Russians in pushing eastward, which has been a source of interest to the Russians ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. There were technical problems with the missile machinery that it probably wouldn't have worked the way they had configured it. There were also issues having to do with Poland and Czechoslovakia and the politics wrapped up there. So the Obama administration has decided to take a new approach. It really hasn't abandoned ballistic missile defense. It's decided to do it a different way.
In what way? What is this different way that they're talking about?
Well, no longer are they going to put the radars and the missiles in Poland and Czechoslovakia. They're going to start in various phases with a sea-based system on a system that is cheaper and is more proven than the one that they had had. They also acknowledged in today's briefing at the Pentagon that the intelligence we have about the Iranian ballistic missile threat, which is a concern of the United States, those in the Middle East, and of course Russia itself, is less than first anticipated, and we have really more time. But nevertheless, this system can go into place earlier, cheaper, more proven. There are other phases to come in the future, and we'll see how it develops.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Poland and the Czech Republic. What is the reaction there? I mean, how did they feel about this?
Well, I think you have to look at two things here. You look at the leadership of each country and the populace of each country. So I think they're not exactly the same all the time. There were protests against this, I think, in both countries. The leadership, especially in Poland, I think, wanted physical American presence there in the form of troops. There are still tensions, I suppose, between...
So is the relationship between Poland and the United States is going to get sour now?
Well, I don't think so. I think these things can be handled. Even explaining in today's briefing, Secretary Gates held out the prospect that at some future point, at various phases down the line, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, things still might go into those countries. Now, that remains to be seen. That's a long way off, and much can happen. But I think that President Obama should be able to resolve some of these issues that concern the Poles and the Czechs, and we can move on.
You know, we've been talking about the fact that this really marks the first real break for Barack Obama in kind of straying from the Bush administration's foreign policy. What do you think is next? What kind of decisions is he going to make that are going to be completely different from the Bush administration, or is this the only one, do you think?
Oh, I think there's even a bigger one, and that we heard that in the speech from Prague when he committed the country to abolition of nuclear weapons. It was something that Bush never came up with. In fact, Bush wanted to make more of them. So I think he already had thrown a marker down in Prague about a very ambitious agenda of what he wants to do in this area. And in this one, of course, it's a major reversal of the Bush administration. He has his own political problems here at home from his right wing. But I think he can counter those by the things that were said today at the Pentagon.
Right, and the mainstream media here has kind of been harder on him, and that's been making headlines. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to be reaction from all those political pundits and analysts tonight on all the major shows here in the United States?
Well, from the right wing, I think it's expected that they'll say, "Oh, he is not defending the country. He gave up something that we need," and on and on. A tired refrain that isn't true, of course. But nevertheless, they will try and make political capital out of it. But I think he has demonstrated that he's not doing what they say, that there is going to be some form of ballistic missile defense put in place. It will not antagonize the Russians the way the other one did. It'll be more effective, cheaper, and come on sooner. So how do the Republicans argue against that?
Well, thank you so much for being here and for your insight. We're going to see what happens, but we will keep you posted on the reaction from here in Washington, D.C., but I'm going to throw it back to you in Moscow.
Well, thank you very much for this. Indeed, that was RT's Dina Gusovsky with Robert Norris, Senior Research Associate at Natural Resources Defense